The pain was a dull, persistent throb in my side, a constant reminder of the surgeon's work. 63 years old, recently discharged. I moved with the slow, deliberate care of a man pieced back together, each breath a small victory against the lingering ache. My small apartment felt alien, the silence amplified by my own fragility. I was dependent, tethered to medication schedules, and the careful instructions of nurses. The world outside felt distant, unimportant. I had seen enough of it. Then the phone rang. It was Miriam, my lawyer, her voice crisp and efficient, cutting through the haze of my recovery. "Mr. Peterson," she said, her tone softening slightly. "I have some news. A lawsuit. Stalking." The word hung in the air. Absurd. Impossible. Stalking. I gripped the phone, a cold dread seeping into my already weary bones. I was barely able to walk, let alone stalk anyone. "Who?" I asked, my voice thin. "Who is accusing me?" "A woman named Clara Jenkins." Miriam paused. "She claims you have been harassing her for months." I closed my eyes. The world was playing a cruel joke. I had nothing left to lose, it seemed. Not my health, not my peace. Now, not even my good name. The accusations accumulated, a bizarre tapestry woven from fabrications. Photographs arrived. Grainy images of a man standing outside Clara Jenkins' apartment, a figure vaguely resembling me, captured by surveillance cameras. Phone records showed calls made from a burner phone, calls described by Clara as menacing, filled with heavy breathing and implied threats. Eyewitnesses, neighbors from her buildings, offered descriptions of a persistent, shadowy presence. A man who loitered, who watched. The cruel absurdity of it all tightened a band around my chest. I was hospitalized for a month. I told Miriam, my voice flat, almost pleading. My surgery, the recovery. I could barely lift a spoon. How could I have done any of this? The timeline was irrefutable. My surgical incision, still tender, was proof. Yet, the evidence against me, meticulously gathered, painted a different picture. The psychological horror was profound. It felt as though a stranger had stolen my face, my name, my life, then twisted it into something monstrous. My identity, a quiet, unremarkable existence, was being rewritten by others, by a malicious, unseen hand. Miriam presented the photos in her office, spreading them across the polished mahogany. "It's not me," I said, pointing to the man's posture, the way he held his shoulders. "He's younger, stronger." There was a subtle difference in the hairline, a sharper cut to the jaw. Miriam, ever pragmatic, had already begun her own quiet investigation. She had noted the inconsistencies, the slightly blurred details that a casual observer might miss. "We need to find this man," she said, her gaze steady, confirming my growing fear. "We need to find the person who looks exactly like you." The search began with quiet precisions. Miriam's investigator, a former police detective named Miller, worked with an almost invisible touch. Social media profiles were scrutinized, then real estate listings, old yearbooks. The digital breadcrumbs led to a series of dead ends, then a flicker of something, a faded photograph on a distant relative's genealogy site. A man with an uncanny resemblance to me, but younger, bolder in his gaze. His name was Elias Thorne, a half-brother I barely knew, estranged for decades. Thorne, I mumbled, a name that felt like a stone in my mouth. We shared a father, a brief, troubled union before he vanished. Thorne had always been a shadow, a whisper in my family's past. Miller's digital forensic team traced the burner phone to a cluster of ghost accounts, then to an IP address that bounced through various offshore proxies before landing in a small, nondescript office building in the city's financial district. Fake profiles, carefully constructed to mirror my public persona, had been used to gather information about Clara Jenkins, her routines, her vulnerabilities. Phone number spoofing had masked the calls, making them appear to originate from my old landlines. The truth, painstakingly assembled, was more insidious than a simple misunderstanding. It was a calculated, deliberate act of impersonation, designed to destroy me. The confrontation was brief, sharp, and controlled. It happened in the glass-walled conference room of Miriam's firm, the city skyline a distant, indifferent backdrop. Elias Thorne sat across the table from me, impeccably dressed, his face a chilling mirror of my own, but hardened by a lifetime of unseen bitterness. He met my gaze with an almost defiant calm, a flicker of something close to amusement in his eyes. He had the same precise, almost delicate hands as our father, the same way of holding his head slightly to the left, but there was no recognition there. No warmth, just a cold calculation. Miriam laid out the evidence, not with fury, but with quiet, devastating precision. The IP addresses, the spoofed calls, the financial transfers from a shell corporation connected to Thorne, payments made to Clara Jenkins, a carefully forged document, a letter from my deceased wife, supposedly detailing an affair with Thorne, a fabrication meant to provide a motive for my alleged stalking. Clara Jenkins, a former employee of Thorne's, had been manipulated, her own financial troubles exploited, her testimony bought. Thorne had orchestrated the entire charade, driven by a twisted desire to destroy my reputation, to erase me. The motive, buried deep in a decades-old family slight, was simple: poisonous envy. The air in the room was thick with unspoken words, with a silent, simmering rage that remained unvoiced. Thorne offered no explanation, no apology, just a slow, almost imperceptible shake of his head. He had failed. That was his only visible reaction. The game was over. The physical recovery was slow, a marathon rather than a sprint. Each day brought a small, incremental improvement, a loosening of the pain, a strengthening of muscles that had atrophied. The legal battle that followed was mercifully swift. Thorne's meticulously crafted web of deceit unraveling under the weight of the evidence. Clara Jenkins, stripped of her false pretense, confessed her role, her voice small and broken. The world, once hostile, began to right itself. Months later, my ex-wife called, her voice hesitant, a fragile bridge connecting past to present. I listened to her talk about the children, about her new life. There was no mention of the lawsuit, no apology, just the quiet acknowledgement of a shared history, now fractured beyond repair. We spoke of mundane things, of weather and small, insignificant events. The conversation ended with a polite goodbye, a final, unspoken farewell to a chapter that had closed. I sat by my window, watching the rain fall, each drop tracing a line on the glass. The experience had taught me a bitter truth. Technology, a tool of connection, could also be a weapon. Distorting identity, rewriting lives, reputation, once a sturdy edifice, could be dismantled brick by a determined manipulator. Yet, truth, however slow its journey, however faint its trace, eventually found its way to the surface. Human endurance, I realized, was not about avoiding the storm, but about weathering it, about finding the quiet strength to stand firm When the world conspires to break you. The world moved on, indifferent to my private battle. But I was changed. I was heavier, quieter, more reflective. I understood then, truth does not always prevail quickly, but it always leaves a trace.